was about to look up for the time. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with a moment of silence, followed by the set-aside prayer. God, help us set aside everything we think we know about you, everything we think we know about ourselves, everything we think we know about others, and everything we think we know about our own recovery, so we may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help us see the truth. Amen. All right, my name is Justin. I'm an alcoholic. I'm always grateful to be me and grateful to be an alcoholic today. So last week we did steps 8 and 9. So most of you have done a list. If you haven't written a list, you can go back to your 4-step, as the big book talks about, and use that as your list for your 8th step. And perhaps you've started on your work towards your 9th step. If you have any questions with any of that, again, you guys can ask me. For those of you who don't have my number, ask the ladies that do, and they'll get it to you. So, yeah. So in the last couple weeks, we're on. So tonight we're going to do step 10 and step 11. So in the last few weeks, we've gone over the first 9 proposals, right? And what we've done is we've got a connection with what the problem is, and where we have to go with it, who we have to go to with it. That it's all about God. That we need to right size and relate ourselves to God. Find that higher power, right? And for most of us, that becomes God over time. And then we find out what the problem is, right? And the problem is ourselves, selfishness and self-centered. Then we find out how to dialogue or how to access that problem. We do an inventory. We've all done an inventory in the last few weeks. And in the process, we became a little bit more freer, right? We've gotten to know our Creator better. And then last week, we went over 8 and 9, as I just mentioned. So 10 and 11. I like to say it's my favorite steps, but they're all my favorite steps. So with 10, continue to take personal inventory. When we're wrong, promptly admit it, right? So we're going to go over what that means when we hear that. So a lot of us think about the same concepts as like in the 4-step, right? When we hear that. But what we're also talking about is when we say continue, we're continuing the work at this point. We're continuing from where we left off at 9, right? As the promises start to come true in our lives, we're continuing from where we stand going forward. And I always like to say that we do this with other people, right? We don't do it alone. The whole process we don't do alone. This is where we get to be intimate with another human being, and now we let somebody know us completely. But that also means we continue forward doing that, right? I always like to talk about 10-step partners. 10-step partner is somebody that I'm going to share my dialogue with before I let it loose on someone else in my life. And continuing to take our personal inventory just means that I'm going to check my behavior, my attitudes, and my reaction. Am I bringing an attitude of love, service, honesty? Am I bringing these things to the table? And then in step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, right? So the very first line there, sought, right? So we're seeking, we're looking, we're searching, right? We've gotten to a point now that we've developed a relationship with God. We've gotten to a point where we've have a better understanding of how we feel. So what our own concept of God, as I like to say, as the book likes to call it. So I've taken time to actually create a relationship with that after I did my 4th and 5th, and then I continue forward, right? Continue. And in the process of seeking, we're looking for what God's will is for us, right? Well, we're going to get into that in a little bit. And I'll have some methods for you. I did pass out. There's 4 absolutes. I hope everybody in the room has a set of the 4 absolutes up here, the pamphlet. And then there's also a 2-way prayer here as well. So you're going to hear me talk about 2-way prayer. I've always mentioned it off and on throughout the last few weeks. All right. So let's go ahead and get into the literature a little bit. Last week we ended with right at the end of 9. So if we're painstaking about this phase, right? As we ended that took us into the thought. And at the very end, it tells us So this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. It is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately, and we make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance is our code. Of others is our code. So it's kind of what I just talked about. It really just mentioned every little thing that I just mentioned a minute ago. It talked about talking about it with someone else. It talks about how we're now entering into the world of the Spirit. And our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Right? So that is a lot of times when I get into step 10 and 11, it's hard for me not to talk about both. I like to separate all the steps, even 8 and 9. I like to separate them, but it's hard for me not to talk about both because here we are, we're in step 10, and it sounds like familiar work that we do just through our prayer and meditation, right? And just through our prayer alone. I know that when someone irritates me, I have to pray about it. But then it also tells us here that we will talk about it with somebody at once. And if we've harmed anybody, we will rectify it immediately. So then here, I love this line here. I think everybody does. And then we ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude towards liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. This is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky, nor are we afraid. This is our experience. This is how we react so long as we keep in spiritual condition. It's a pretty heavy line. So let's focus on a little bit. So on step 2, we discovered that the problem was that we had an insane behavior when it came to drinking. We did not think or react normal when it came to alcohol, right? So that's what we get when then we know that we need a power in ourselves. Here it's telling us that we seldom for the time sanity. So it says for by this time sanity will have returned. So it's saying that we're not always going to have this insane behavior, right? A lot of us like to think of when we hear the insanity of the drinking, a lot of us, well, just in step 2 alone, I know I used to think of it as that I was batshit crazy. I used to think that was the problem, and it was just that I was lacking God. So it's not that I'm batshit crazy. It's that there is another problem there besides just the alcohol for me. The problem is that I have a maladjusted attitude towards life, and I can't live it well, and I need something in order to help, and that for me is God, right? And then here it's telling me by doing the first 9 proposals, I am now relieved of this problem. I no longer suffer this insanity, and I can become stable, right? I'm stable in a way today that I never thought I would be. I literally was so afraid of sobering up for years because I was afraid that every time I sobered up, the rat race that went on inside my head, somebody was going to find out, and I was going to end my life in a straitjacket. I literally thought that because it was so chaotic. All right. And then the last part of that, it says, this is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. So again, continue, right? So as long as we continue this path, no matter how tough it gets, no matter how much turmoil there may be from time to time in life and sobriety, if we continue on, this is how it's going to be for us. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to fight it anymore. We're not struggling with it anymore. We're not swearing it off. We're finally comfortable. So, and then I always talk about the grumpy old timer. Here we go. It is the easiest. That was a dick move. Sorry. It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are the thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. I always love that statement. So it's telling me here, so I'm a selfish, self-centered human being, right? But I've learned how to be a little bit less selfish. I've learned how to be, we're going to talk about the absolutes. I've learned how to be a lot more loving. I've learned how to be a lot more unselfish, a lot more pure, and a lot more honest than I ever was when I first came in here. And in the process here, it tells us this is the proper use of the will, right? It's telling us how we can use our will. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish, right? So much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all power and knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed direction, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further, and that means more action. You know, when I was new, I used to hate that line. More action. That just means I got a lot more work ahead of me, right? And now when I hear that, I'm grateful. You know, and I was just on the phone with someone before I came here tonight that we were just talking about it. And sometimes it's just the little things that we get through, the small hurdles that we make past that is the progress moving forward. It's better to always try to move forward no matter how little it is. And sometimes life hurts, right? But it's about that move forward, and it takes action. It takes action. And what is that action item, right? I always like to think about the triangle. And the triangle is unity, service, and recovery. And we finish that triangle with those three things. Are we doing, and I'm not talking about just at a group level. At a group level is great. But what am I doing on a personal level? You know, am I bringing an attitude of service to others? Am I a part of a fellowship of people? Am I making phone calls? Am I staying connected? And am I continuing to do the work? Am I continuing to maintain my recovery? Even if that means we do things like this and reevaluate the steps in our lives. So, let's find out what more action is. Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We should not be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have a proper attitude and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. Let's find out what they are. So when we retire at night, constructively reviewing our day, were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which we should have discussed with another person at once? Were we kind and loving towards all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Or were we thinking about what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what What corrective measures should be taken? So that would be the end of the day process, right? So here we're in the step 11. We just got into where we're at step 11, and it's asking us to take a review. So it's the same attitude that we take into our day with step 10, right? But here at the end of the day, we're asking these sets of questions to see where I sit with these things. And for anybody who doesn't know, there's great tools out there. You can actually access these questions. What's the name of the app? Everything AA. Thank you. Everything AA has these questions for you at the end of the day that you can ask yourself and go through. It's a little checklist, things you can fill out. You know, and I'm a big believer. Are we making phone calls and talking about this stuff? Am I staying current with my sponsor? Do I have a person that I trust? What's the term that you always like to use? Spiritual consent. So do I have somebody in my life that I can go to and have a value of honesty that's going to help me stay out of the way, because I am the problem and I will be in the way if I'm not careful. So that's what they get into. And then here it gives you, again, we're going to get into the next access of this. On awakening, so does anybody ever think that it's kind of weird that they started with night instead of day? Yeah, so here's the reason why they do that, right? So the reason why they start with night is day is because, so we've done all this work, right? We've just did our 9-step work, and we get to the end of the day, and our goal is to continue, right? So when we continue and then we pray about it, we're going to review where we left off for that day. So we haven't gotten to the point yet, right? Assuming, right? So we're just now starting to develop this. And once we get to this point where we've worked the first 9 proposals, and now we're working on the rest of it, trying to create maintenance, we start at the end of the day, right? Just like we do everything else, we go through a whole day and we end it at the very end of the day. So that's why it starts at the end of the day. So it says, upon awakening, or on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plan for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking it to be divorced from self-pity, dishonesty, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance. For after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. All right. In thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought or decision. We relax and take it easy. We do not struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. What used to be a hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. Being still inexperienced with having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we are going to be inspired all the time. We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. We usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will and are careful to make no request for ourselves only. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. We are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. Many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that, and it does not work. You can easily see why. All right, so we just covered a lot, right? I just gave you three little paragraphs. It tells you how we're going to handle on awakening, the things we're going to consider, right? And then it also tells you how we're going to try to plan for the day. So a lot of us, I always say, for those who love to run or go for car rides or whatever it is you like to do and relax and kind of get your connection with God, that stuff's good, right? But when we're talking about prayer and meditation, when we're talking about taking that time out in the morning, that is not exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about trying to create intimacy. Is that a weird concept to anybody when you hear that? Creating intimacy? Was for me. When I heard that, I'm like, I don't even know what that means. All I know that I need to create some kind of contact, right? It needs to be conscious. It needs to be sought. It needs to be something I actually work at, right? But I never really truly knew that I can be one-on-one intimate with God. And that's what this is teaching us, right? So on awakening, we're going to take time out. It's not just the drive into work, right? You have anybody have awesome prayer on their way into work? I know I do. Sometimes I'll go into work and I'll be driving and I'll have some really awesome prayer. And I'll feel like I'm getting some good feedback. But then when I get to work, I also take a separate time out. That separate time out is the meditation that I work on. And that's the setup for my day. So we're going to try to figure out what the plan is for the day, right? How am I going to go about today? What kind of things am I going to tackle? Am I going to be any good at it? And what I do know is that I need to take God with me, right? And then talking about that, I'm going to get into one of my favorite subjects. I mean, obviously prayer, right? So my main goal in my own personal life right here and right now is to get a better relationship with God so I can have a better relationship with others. I'm going to take a quote that I heard recently. I'm going to mess it up a little bit here, but the thing that has really been a big eye-opener for me is the idea, and I think I've always kind of had this in there, I just never could put it into words, letting God love me so he can love you through me. That concept alone is the idea of what I'm about to get into. So I'm going to talk about two-way prayer. You guys have all heard me mention it a few times. And when I talk about two-way prayer, you're also going to hear me talk about the four absolutes. So again, I'll repeat what the four absolutes are. It's honesty, love, unselfishness, and purity. Again, I always get these out of order. I don't think it really matters. Love is one of the more profound ones. Honesty is one we continue to work at, right? When they're going to if you read this little pamphlet, it's going to say all kinds of neat things about this stuff. One of my favorites is, I think it's in the honesty part where it talks about continuing to strive for. It's like being in a car race. I'm constantly racing towards this goal of being more honest, knowing that I'll never hit the finish line, but the closer and the harder I work at it, the better it feels, and the more I want it, and the more I want to chase for it. And then the race never ends, right? And it's kind of like our success in AA. No matter how hard I push, no matter how hard I try, no matter how much growth I make, there is so much more growth I have to make. I love the saying, I know who it is I want to be. I know I may never be who it is I want to be, but I thank God I'm not who it is I used to be, right? So in two-way prayer, so we have this little two-way prayer packet here that I brought in for each one of you. So this two-way prayer just gives you a good idea of how it works. I'm going to give you a synopsis of what it works for me, and then we'll kind of go over some of the literature here. Actually, I'll do it the other way around. So here, it's just going to tell us a few simple things. So it's going to give you some suggestions on what the experiment is. I like the idea of an experiment. So if anybody has ever tried any kind of experiment, whether it was in science class or when we think about science or whatever it may be, so an experiment. So I'm going to challenge all of you to start trying to get a pen and paper, get a pad, and start practicing this as an experiment. See how it goes. Do it for 7 days. If after 7 days you feel like you got something out of this, that's great. Some people will usually suggest much more, like 30 days. I just want to challenge you to try the experiment for 7 days. So one of the things we're going to do, so as you go through it, so it says here, before you begin, look over these fundamental points. There are true and false, are true and are based on the experience of thousands of people. So what I'm giving you here isn't something that's brand new. I'm going to give you a little bit of history of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous came from an organization called the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group used to practice these principles, and AA adopted them, and they did it for a very long time. Bill Willison uses to say that when we get away from the prayer and meditation is when AA is in trouble. And in the very beginning, this is the same work they were doing. So you see that you got the 4 points here. God is alive. He's always around us. If we've gotten to this point where we've gotten to a point where we developed who we believe, or we have a concept of who God is in our life, we're going to get a new idea of that. So God is invaluable. We cannot see him or touch him, but God is there, right? He is with you now. He is beside you. He surrounds you. He fills the room or the whole place where you are now. He is in you now. He is in your heart. I don't know about you guys, that speaks truth to me. But again, I didn't feel that way when I first came in here. I came in here I thought I was an atheist. I don't think I believe in atheism anymore, but I came in here with some kind of idea of atheism. So as you go through these few points, I'm going to skip down. So when we think about prayer, right, how many of you think that had the experience anything like what I mentioned a few weeks ago, where when you pray, you feel as though it's going into dead air, it's going into nothing, that it's just vanishing into the void, right? That's how prayer started out for me. And then here we go. God cares very much for you. That is not something I believed. I didn't think God gave one crap about me. When I first came in here, matter of fact, that's why I didn't believe in God. It wasn't that I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in the idea of God because I didn't think God cared enough about me for it to matter. I honestly thought that the only path, if any of that existed, for me was the path to hell. I honestly thought that. So he is interested in you. He has a plan for your life. Could you imagine God has a plan for your life? Doesn't that sound awesome? We come to a point where we develop a new relationship. We get a new understanding of who we are. We develop new relationships with others. We actually get a new understanding of who other people are. And then here we are. God has a plan for your life. I wonder if we can hear what that plan is, right? He has an answer for your very needs and problems you face. How do you obtain that? Well, so in two-way prayer, the practice of two-way prayer, and the way it works is, you'll get a piece of paper, and you create a proposal to God, whatever your problem is, whatever your dissent is, whatever you're going through. And you just ask God to guide you in these matters. I actually have some two-way prayer here if you want to see it at the end of the meeting as well. But so the point is to come to God and say, God, I'm struggling with this matter today. I need your help. Could you please guide me? Grant me your wisdom. Give me your understanding. Show me the path I'm supposed to take. So when I write my two-way prayer, that's literally what I'm writing. I will always start it with God, or some people write Lord or my Heavenly Father, and then they'll write down their prayer request for the day. And then when they do that, so the next phase, so the next phase is where you're going to write down, the way I like to put it is write down a sense of endearment as though it's coming from God. So you're going to pause. As soon as you get your prayer written, you're going to pause for a few seconds, just long enough to try to just pretend for a minute. Again, this is an experiment, right? Just pretend for a second that God is about to answer you. And how would you think God's going to answer you? Well, that's what these four absolutes are all about. He sure in the hell isn't going to answer you with the opposite of this. He's not going to come to you in a selfish, inconsiderate, unloving, unempathetic way, right? That's not how my God works, and that's not how the relationship with my God works. And it's developed over time. It continues to grow, right? But so God's going to come at you with the same attitude that you would gain in the four absolutes. So what I always like to tell people is try to start it out with a sense of endearment. So one of the things I put in my two-way prayer every morning when I start a prayer back from God, and it's a prayer back, right? You're going to pause for a few seconds, you start your prayer back. And you start it out as simple as something as, my sweet child. And then as it comes, you let it flow. You don't edit, you don't hesitate, you just let it flow. Whatever comes to mind, even if it's broken up sentences, however you want to write this out, then you just continue to write it out until you feel a break. Or you get to a point where you're like, I'm not sure if this is God or if this is me. And you stop. And then you gauge it against the 4 absolutes. And then at the very end of it, you're supposed to review what you just did. Review what came back from you. And when you do that, you can review it and say, okay, how much of this is me and how much of this is God? And then what I'm going to tell you is that I can't sit here and not tell you it's God that's answering me. But I'm also not going to sit here and tell you like I'm batshit crazy that God is talking directly to me. But what I can tell you, regardless of what you want to believe, is that this is at the minimum the best version of me that ever existed. Because sometimes the things that I get back in my two-way prayer are well beyond the Justin I know and the Justin you know. Sometimes I will get answers back that are just completely open with total love, total honesty, absolute love, absolute honesty, absolute purity, and absolute unselfishness. And as long as I'm trying to gauge it off of these 4 absolutes and the questions that go along with it, I can take the action items from it. I have prayers here in my bag if you need, that you can go ahead and look through to kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. And then at the very end, the book talked about this. So then what we'll do is we'll gauge that and we'll take what the action item is into the end of the day. And as we do that, we're taking the action items from the prayer back. And then what I've recently started doing with some friends is I will personally take prayers from that. Like, what's one of the examples? What was it today? Calm. So today, I had a rough start. I'm on my way into work, and I wanted to make sure I grabbed my bag. I set it by the front door. It wasn't a bad morning. Started out like any other morning. Had my coffee, I made it, I set it on the counter, I got my food ready to go, I got my phone on me, and I'm like, all right, I got everything I need. So I grab my bag, and I head out the door, and I'm heading out the door, I'm like, all right, I got everything, phone, watch, I'm going through the checklist of things I need. I got everything I need. I get about 7 minutes down the road, I get onto the interstate. As soon as I hit the interstate, I realize I forgot my coffee. Now that may not sound like a big deal, but that is a huge deal to me. Yeah, that's my lifeblood, right? That's the thing that gets me going on everything I do. I need my coffee in the morning. I don't care if you don't, I do. So I didn't have my coffee. And I'm like, my first thought was, I should just turn around. Now, I'm on the interstate. It's not like I could turn around right there. I have to go 5 miles up or 10 miles up, whatever it is, and go back. So I'm like, well, screw that, I'll be late. And I'll be late considerably because I have to leave my house by a certain time, and I am already running a couple minutes late from that as it is. So then I go ahead and I'm like, screw it. I stop and get a cup of coffee, add an espresso shot. I was not completely satisfied. It was not near as strong as my coffee, but that's okay. I had coffee, right? I was able to just start from there. Problem is the sun likes to shine without asking my permission. So I'm already kind of in this funk, I'm in this mood, right? So then I get to work and I'm like, all right. And I don't have my coffee. Usually about 30 minutes into my drive, I start drinking it so I can my brain starts working and whatever. And I'm trying to pray and stuff on my way to work. I get to work and I'm sitting there and I'm just like, this is bullshit. I don't feel like praying. I don't feel like doing this today. That was literally my attitude. But I try not to ever let a day go by. I've been doing two-way prayer for a little over a year, and I think I've missed one. And that was because I got busy with the family. So I sit there and I start my two-way prayer, and I ask God for guidance and help me be the best version of me that I can for those about me. It was something along those lines. And then I got the answer I got back, which was really funny to me because as I shared it with other people, they got a little bit more out of it than I did, which gave me some fuel out of it. But it said something along the lines of, you need to try to be calm. experience the moments, relax and take it easy. Try to be calm. I'm like, okay, I don't have coffee. How the hell am I supposed to be calm? Right? I'm not thinking about that. I'm writing it back, and this is what's coming back to me from God. You just got to be calm and take it easy, and focus on what you have to do today. Right? So then I do this whole thing, and I write down my the absolutes. I write out my questions, and then I even come up with a prayer. God, please. So this is the final part, right? So God, please, or no, I don't say God at this point. This is my prayer for the day that I'm going to take into my day. So I usually put down something like, I pray that I'm able to be calm through my day and take it easy. I pray that I'm able to put the action necessary that I need to put into my day so I could be the best me. That's my prayer that I take with me all day. And I share this two-way prayer with other people so I can gauge it, to see if other people go, well, that's more you than it is God, right? It's called a shared prayer. Some people call that three-way prayer. So this is the process I go through every morning. I've been doing this for a little over a year. Here's what I'm going to tell you about the experience I've had with two-way prayer. And this is why I'm pushing the idea of two-way prayer for an experiment. Just try it once. Try it for 7 days. If you don't like it, that's okay. Just try it. Just practice it. Here's what happened to me. I got the same thing said to me through a podcast, and I'm listening. And he says, try it for 30 days. And my head was, well, I'll try it for 7 days. Right? Why not? Right? I'll start small. So I try it for 7 days. But here's where my prayer life was prior to. My prayer life was good. My meditation life was good. My thought life was good. My relationship with God was good. So there was nothing bad about my experience. I had a great experience for my first 20 years of sobriety. I tried this two-way prayer, and it transformed me. I didn't go into it with the idea that I was going to be transformed. I went into it with the idea that, sure, I'll try this. Anything different, why not? I wasn't in a bad place spiritually. I wasn't in a bad place with my family. Matter of fact, I was continuing to improve the current situation that I was in with my family, and things were getting better. But I thought, why not? I'll try this. Why not? Right? It's like anything else. You know what the problem is? I'm the problem. It's weird. I don't need to do that. I was the same way towards bidets. My attitude was the same way towards that. So I'm like, you know what? Why have a closed mind? I wanted to have an open mind because that's what my prayer life has always taught me. Try to continue to have an open mind so I could be the best me towards others and for others. And I was making a lot of amends with people that I had problems with at work at that point too, because I was in management and I had some issues with some people. So my prayer life was good. But when I started doing two-way prayer, what happened? The transformation was amazing. I really didn't expect to have, I thought what I had with God was intimate. And the way I'm going to describe it from my own personal experience, not to say that this is going to be yours, because whatever you're doing, I'm sure it's good. But for me, what happened was I developed an intimate relationship on a level that I never thought could exist. And what I discovered is that God does talk to me. God does give me direction. God does tell me what to do. And God does care about me. And God does want good things for me. That was the experience that I learned from this. Now, I believed those things before in words. I believed it because I was experiencing it at a minimal basis. But until I started doing two-way prayer, I had no idea how much God wants from me. And all He wants from me is for me to give Him my heart, not my words, not my actions. He wants me to give my heart. And as long as I'm doing that, every action I take is most likely on a better path, most likely in a better direction in which I was taking before. So, please try the experiment. That's all I ask. All right, so then, down at the bottom here, we'll get back into the book. So as we go through the day, we pause. When agitated or doubtful, we ask for right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, "Thy will be done." We are then in less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decision. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily. We are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. It works, it really does. We ask God, we alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in the simple way we have just outlined. But this is not all. There is action and more action. There's that action word again. Faith without works is dead. The next chapter is entirely devoted to step 12. So we're not going to get into step 12 today, but so a lot has been said. So I wanted to make sure I finished that book. So one thing I'm going to tell you to conclude with everything that I had just told you. So when I talked about the founders, Dr. Bob, Bill, and all the other alcoholics that came before us, before Alcoholics Anonymous was Alcoholics Anonymous, they all were a part of the Oxford group. And in the Oxford group, they were practicing these principles. So when the 12 steps were written, when Bill wrote down the 12 steps, he was doing the same concept that I just talked about a few minutes ago with two-way prayer. He was trying to figure out what worked best. And as he came to his asking God to help him in this thing, and as he started writing all this stuff down, this is what he came up with. And it was a brilliant masterpiece, right? I mean, we can all agree that there's not a better design out there for a way of living. It can work for all. Isn't that what its book tells us? It can work for all, right? And that is truly our experience. So at this point, let's hope that we can get excited, right? I don't know about you, nothing excites me more than coming up here and sharing my experience with you guys. I get so excited that I want to see you guys get excited. What I want to see is that maybe something will happen to you guys and you get transformed. And you get transformed to the point that now you want to go out and give the same thing to others. And if we're going through this book and not worrying about what sponsorship is, when we go through the book, this book helps us be the best sponsors we can. There's nothing that's going to come out of any one of our mouths that's going to help anybody more than just our experience and the book. The book will guide us, right? And I'm going to get more and more into that next week because we're going to devote next week just to step 12. Yeah, I don't really have much else. Do you guys have any questions? No? That's awesome. Well, I really hope you guys try to check out two-way prayer next week. Let me know how it goes. I always like to hear it. So there's a few people in this room that are already practicing it as well. So if you have any questions, you can also ask them.
I don't have a question. Prayer is the lost 11 step.
Oh, I can try. I'm a little off today. I didn't have my coffee this morning. That was like, 12 hours ago. Yeah, so, I didn't actually mention. So the question is because I shared that it was a lot how they talked about it being the lost 11th step prayer or 11th step. Yeah, you know what? I don't know why I didn't think about that. Maybe it's because I am a little off today and I am feeling it a little bit. So when I talked about Bill practicing this, so they call it the lost 11th step because this is exactly what they were doing, and this is what the book was kind of suggesting too when they were doing their 11 steps back then. And so when I mentioned, I don't even think about it because I know the history. When I mentioned Bill talking about us getting away from our prayer and meditation, he was actually talking about how we were getting away from our lost 11th step. So there was a time even. It was back in the 50s, they were still pushing this quite a bit. They were pushing doing some kind of written form of your prayer. They would always ask you, how was your prayer and meditation? And anybody who's got 30 years or more remembers a time when they would ask you, how was your prayer and meditation? You don't hear that at the tables as much anymore, but that was always a big deal because our prayer and meditation is very important. It's imperative to our function towards going forward, as the book talked about. As we went in through 10 and 11 out of the book, it talks about how important it is to do this. So to really answer that question, that's a long That's a long dialogue of words, or a lot of information to really kind of spit out there. But so the reason why they call it a lost 11th step is because we got away from it. And we got away from it somewhere in the 70s, actually, believe it or not. I know it sounds crazy, right? The 70s was what, 40 years ago? Well, a little bit more, but it's about 40 years ago, right? Because 74 would have been 40 years ago, right? No, 50 years ago, sorry. So I'm way off, right? So that was 50 years ago. Yeah, I was off by 10 years. So that was about 50 years ago. And what happened was a change in how alcoholics, so we grew. We grew at such excelling numbers that the biggest goal is always to try to get this information to people as quick as possible. How can we help people transform their lives as quick as possible? We even got away from that concept as well. What we do now is we allow people, or we give people the time to take their time. And now that's okay for a heavy, hard drinker, but for the real alcoholic like myself, that's problematic, because any amount of time dry is going to get me a lot closer to that drink until I have that experience, right? So somewhere in there, we kind of lost our way. And they call it the lost 11th step for that reason, because we kind of stepped away from doing this work. There's some of this, and there's things that we did back when the Oxford group was still around that we don't do today for good reason, right? I mean, the program is real, the AA program has really transformed beyond the state in which they ever expected. But there are some aspects that we have just kind of lost our way out of it. And what happened too was the influx of AA members when the 80s happened. And the reason why I bring that up is because then we had all the hospitals, and we had, I think Reagan was one who opened up the opportunity for drunks to get admitted so they can get help and get better, get them off the streets. And so then what happened is we just got inundated with, instead of what the problem is, the problem being everything else. You know, maybe I drink because my life sucks, or because my father beat me. I drink because my car broke down, or, you know, it's circumstances in my life. And that's not why we drink, right? We all know that we ultimately drink because it's the only thing that works for us, right? It's the one thing that when I start picking up alcohol, I feel comfortable doing that. And when I drink, I develop the phenomenon of craving, the obsession of the mind. And it literally is the only thing that I know that works for me until I develop this thing. But when the treatment centers, what they did, and they still do it to this day, they teach us to change our circumstances. Well, maybe if we change our circumstances, maybe if we move our environment. Now, I'm not saying still hang out in the same environments, but those aren't the problem. The environment's not the problem. The life I had's not the problem. Because one of my favorite things about Alcoholics Anonymous is when I listen to people that grew up in wonderful homes, who didn't have the abuse that I had, didn't have the molestation that I experienced, didn't have all the violence and everything else that came along in my life. They didn't have that. They had wonderful, loving parents, good Christian home, people that prayed together, siblings that didn't drink, and yet they're the same alcoholic as me. Nothing gets me more excited than knowing that I'm just an average garden variety alcoholic, and that what makes me an alcoholic isn't the circumstances in my life. So that's part of, so to kind of answer that, I know I went off a little bit, but to kind of answer the question, that's part of how we got away from it. But yeah, they call it the forgotten 11th step because that's what they did. And I'll give you a quick old story. So Dr. Bob, and I'm going to call them the good old timers because that's what the book is called, right? So Dr. Bob and the good old timers, when they would get up in the morning, his wife would do her two-way prayer. And when she was finished with her two-way prayer, this is again written two-way prayer. When she would do her two-way prayer, she was done, she'd tell the boys what their plan was for the day. And then they'd go out and work with other alcoholics. So just imagine. Try this experiment for a little bit. Get back to me. I want to know how you feel. So anybody else? All right, let's end it with the Lord's Prayer. Who keeps us sober? Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory forever. Amen. Sucks if you don't.